I'm David, 57, male. I live in a sprawling, quiet house just outside of Seattle, a home I designed myself during the peak of my architectural career. For the last 6 months, I have lived here alone, surrounded by the echoes of a marriage that lasted 25 years. I am, or I thought I was, a widower, a man attempting to rebuild a foundation after the structure of his life had been violently torn down. Here is the teaser. I buried an empty casket 6 months ago. I mourned a woman I loved more than life itself. I cried until my tear ducts were dry and my throat was raw. I thought I was living through the tragedy of a sudden loss. But yesterday, I found out that my grief was a joke. I found out that while I was picking out headstones, she was picking out throw pillows for a new life. I saw my dead wife buying organic kale in a supermarket, and that sight shattered my world more than her death ever did. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The knock on the door at 2:00 a.m. is a sound that no human being ever forgets. It is a distinct, heavy sound, authoritative yet hesitant. It doesn't sound like a delivery driver or a neighbor returning a borrowed tool. It sounds like the end of the world. I remember staring at the digital clock on my nightstand, the red numbers burning into my retinas. 2 to 3 a.m. Sarah wasn't in bed next to me. She was supposed to be driving back from her sister's place in Portland, a trip she had made 100 times. She had called me at 9:00 p.m. to say she was stopping for coffee and then hitting the road. She said, "I love you. See you soon." Those were the last words I heard from her. When I opened the door, the cold night air rushed in, chilling my bare feet. 2 officers stood there. One was older, with wary eyes that had seen too much of this. The other was young, looking down at his notebook to avoid making eye contact with the ruin he was about to cause. "Mr. David Reynolds?" the older one asked. Yes, my voice was a croak, I knew. In that split second, I knew everything even though I knew nothing. "May we come in?" they told me in the living room. Sarah's car, her beloved white SUV, had been found at the bottom of a ravine off a winding coastal highway. The skid marks suggested she had swerved to avoid something. A deer, perhaps, or falling rock, and gone through the guardrail. The drop was over 200 feet into the churning Pacific Ocean. The tide was high. The current was violent. They had found the vehicle battered and submerged, but the driver's side door had been torn off by the impact. "The cabin was empty, sir," the officer said softly. "The currents in that area, they are notoriously strong. We have search and rescue teams scanning the coastline, but—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Presumed dead is a sterile legal term, but in the ears of a husband, it sounds like a guillotine blade dropping. The next 2 weeks were a blur of gray fog and black coffee. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I sat by the phone, waiting for them to tell me they had found her body. I needed to see her. I needed to know it was real. My sister, Emily, flew in from Chicago immediately. She took over the logistics because I was catatonic. She handled the police, the insurance, the press, because apparently a local architect's wife driving off a cliff is news for a slow Tuesday. "David, you have to eat something," Emily would say, placing a plate of toast in front of me. I would just look at it. How could I eat when Sarah was out there in the cold water? The search was called off after 10 days. They said the ocean doesn't always give back what it takes. They told me to prepare a memorial service without a body. Do you know what it feels like to pick out a casket knowing it will stay empty? It feels like you are participating in a lie, a theater production of grief. But we had to do it. We needed closure, or at least that's what everyone kept telling me. The funeral was held on a rainy Tuesday. It was fitting. The sky was weeping along with us. The church was packed. Sarah was popular. She was a vibrant interior designer, the life of every party, the woman who remembered everyone's birthday. Friends, clients, neighbors, they all came. They wore black. They held umbrellas. They whispered about what a tragedy it was, how young she was, how happy we had been. I stood at the front, next to that mahogany box. I rested my hand on the polished wood. Inside, there were just photos of her, some letters I had written, and her favorite scarf that still smelled like her perfume, sandalwood and vanilla. That smell broke me. "I'm so sorry." "David," people said, forming a line of sympathetic faces. She was a light. "Be strong, David. If there's anything you need." I nodded at them, a mechanical doll winding down. I looked at their faces, but I didn't really see them. I was looking for her. Part of me, the irrational, grieving part, expected the doors to burst open and for Sarah to walk in, laughing, telling us it was all a big mistake, that she had swum to shore and had been living in a cave or something ridiculous. But the doors stayed closed. The organ music played. The priest spoke about God's plan. I wanted to scream at the priest. What kind of plan involves a 48-year-old woman being eaten by crabs at the bottom of the ocean while her husband stands alone in a suit that suddenly feels 2 sizes too big? One face stood out to me that day, though I didn't think much of it at the time. Mark, he was the financial advisor we had used a few times for our investments. A tall, well-kept man, about 50. He was crying, not just polite, single-tear crying. He was sobbing. I remember thinking it was odd. I knew Sarah and he were friendly in a professional capacity, and maybe they had lunch a few times to discuss portfolios, but his grief seemed excessive. He came up to me, gripping my hand with both of his. His palms were sweaty. David, he choked out. She was a magnificent woman. This is a loss for the world. Thank you, Mark, I said numbly. I know she respected you a lot. He nodded, wiping his eyes with a silk handkerchief, and hurried away. I filed it away as just another person overwhelmed by the tragedy. Grief does strange things to people. The weeks following the funeral were the hardest. The silence of the house was deafening. I am an architect. I understand space. I understand how sound travels. I designed this house to be open-airy, filled with light and laughter. Now, it felt like a mausoleum. Every room had her imprint. The kitchen where she made her smoothies. The living room where she had insisted on that ridiculous velvet sofa. The master bathroom with her half-used creams and lotions still on the counter. Emily stayed for a month, but she had her own life, her own job as a journalist back in Chicago. She couldn't babysit a 57-year-old man forever. David, you need to see a therapist, she told me before she left. You're not processing this. I'm processing it fine. I lied. I'm just sad. That's normal. You're not sleeping. You're losing weight. You look like a ghost. I feel like a ghost, I admitted. After she left, the real darkness set in. I went back to work, but my heart wasn't in it. I stared at blueprints and saw nothing but lines. I missed deadlines. My partners were understanding, but I could feel their patience fraying. Take some time, David, they said. Go on a sabbatical. So I did. I spent my days wandering the empty house and my nights drinking scotch, staring at the ocean from my deck, wondering if she was out there. I tortured myself with thoughts of her final moments. Was she scared? Did she call out my name? Did she suffer? The police report was closed. Accidental death. The insurance company paid out the life insurance policy, a substantial sum, $2 million. Sarah had increased her policy a year ago. At the time, she said it was just being responsible because we were getting older. I didn't question it. I just signed the papers. Now, that money sat in my account, feeling like blood money. I didn't touch it. I didn't want it. 6 months passed. 6 months of gray. The sharp, stabbing pain of the first few weeks had dulled into a constant, heavy ache in my chest. I had established a routine. I woke up. I forced myself to drink coffee. I walked the dog. A golden retriever named Buster who missed her just as much as I did, and I tried to exist. I had started to convince myself that I was accepting it. I told myself, this is your life now, David. You are the widower. You are the survivor. I started sorting through her clothes, thinking about donating them. I couldn't bring myself to do it yet, but I had boxed some of them up. It felt like a betrayal, taping up those boxes. I remember holding her favorite red dress, the one she wore to our anniversary dinner last year. I buried my face in it, inhaling deeply. The scent was fading. That terrified me. The memory of her smell was disappearing, and I felt like I was losing her all over again. I put the dress in the box and taped it shut. Goodbye, baby, I whispered to the cardboard. I thought that was the end of the story. I thought the book was closed. I thought I knew exactly where my wife was, at the bottom of the sea, lost to the elements, an angel taken too soon. I was wrong. I was so incredibly, stupidly wrong. It was a Tuesday. Why do life-altering events always seem to happen on Tuesdays? It was a mundane, overcast afternoon in late October. The leaves were turning brown and mushy on the streets of Seattle, and the air had that biting dampness that signals the coming winter. I needed light bulbs. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? My life fell apart because of halogen bulbs. But the track lighting in my home office had burned out, and because I'm particular about the color temperature of the light, architectural habits die hard. I couldn't just go to the local corner store. I needed a specific brand that was only stocked at a large home improvement center in Bellevue, about a 40-minute drive from my house. I almost didn't go. It was raining, and Buster was curled up by the fire, and the scotch bottle was calling my name. But Emily had called earlier that morning, checking in. Did you get out of the house yesterday? She had asked. No, I admitted. David, you have to leave the house. Go run an errand. Just drive somewhere, please, for me. Guilt is a powerful motivator, so I put on my coat, grabbed my keys, and got into my car. The drive was uneventful. I listened to talk radio, letting the drone of voices fill the silence. I bought the light bulbs. That took 10 minutes. Since I was already in Bellevue, and it was lunchtime, I decided to stop at an upscale outdoor mall nearby to grab a sandwich. I wasn't hungry, but I knew I needed to eat. I walked into a high-end grocery store, the kind that sells $20 cheese and wine that costs more than my first car. Sarah used to love this place. We used to come here on weekends, browsing the aisles, laughing at the prices of the imported truffles. Walking in was a mistake. The memories hit me instantly. The smell of roasting coffee and fresh bread. It smelled like our Saturdays. I kept my head down, focused on getting to the deli counter, grabbing a turkey sandwich, and getting the hell out of there. I was standing near the produce section, waiting for a path to clear through the crowd of shoppers when I saw her. At first, my brain didn't register it. It filtered the image as someone who looks like Sarah. I had seen a dozen women in the last 6 months who looked like Sarah. A similar haircut, a similar coat, a similar walk. Every time, my heart would jump, and every time, I would realize it was a stranger and feel like an idiot. This woman was standing by the organic vegetables, inspecting a bundle of kale. She was about 30 feet away. She looked different. Her hair, which Sarah had always kept long and chestnut brown, was now a sharp, angled bob dyed a platinum blonde. She was wearing glasses, thick, black-rimmed frames. Sarah had perfect vision. She never wore glasses. She was wearing a heavy trench coat belted tightly at the waist and high-heeled boots. I stared. I couldn't help it. There was something about the posture, the way she held her shoulders, slightly hunched as she examined the label on the kale. "Stop it, David," I whispered to myself. "Stop torturing yourself." I turned away, gripping my basket so hard my knuckles turned white. I started to walk toward the checkout. I needed to leave. I couldn't breathe. Then I heard a laugh. It was a small, short laugh. Someone nearby had dropped a melon, and it had rolled near her feet. A stock boy rushed to pick it up, apologizing, and the woman laughed and said something to him. The sound froze the blood in my veins. I know that laugh. I have heard that laugh every day for 25 years. It's a specific laugh, a little throaty, ending in a sharp intake of breath. I spun around. The woman was turning back to her cart. As she did, she reached up with her left hand and tucked a strand of that platinum hair behind her ear. My basket fell from my hand. It hit the floor with a loud clatter. The light bulb shattered. That gesture, the ear tuck. Sarah did that. She did that exactly like that. She used her ring finger and pinky, keeping her index finger extended. It was a weird, unique tick she had since college. The noise of the basket dropping caused heads to turn, including hers. For 1 second, one eternity, our eyes met across the organic produce aisle. Her eyes were blue. Sarah's eyes were blue. But the moment we locked eyes, I saw it. I saw the recognition. It wasn't the confused look of a stranger wondering why a man dropped his basket. It was a flash of pure, unadulterated terror. Her eyes widened. Her face went pale beneath the makeup. Her mouth opened slightly. "She knew me, Sarah?" I croaked. It came out as a whisper, lost in the noise of the store. She didn't wait. She abandoned her cart right there in the middle of the aisle. She spun on her heel, clutching her purse, and walked fast, almost running, toward the exit. "Sarah!" I shouted this time. My voice cracked, loud and desperate. People were staring at me. "Sir?" "Are you okay?" a woman asked, stepping toward me. I pushed past her. "Sarah!" "Wait!" I started running. I am 57 years old. I am not a sprinter. My knees protested, my breath hitched, but I ran. I scrambled past the checkout lines, ignoring the security guard who shouted, "Sir! The glass!" I burst out of the automatic doors into the rainy parking lot. The cold water hit my face, mixing with the sweat that had instantly broken out on my forehead. I scanned the lot, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. There, about 50 yards away, the woman in the trench coat was practically sprinting toward a silver sedan. It wasn't Sarah's car. It was a new model, a luxury Lexus. "Sarah!" I screamed, running toward her. She reached the car. She didn't look back. She fumbled with the keys, got the door open, and threw herself inside. I was 20 yards away. "Sarah, please! It's me!" The engine roared to life. The reverse lights flared white. She backed out aggressively, tires squealing on the wet asphalt, almost hitting a parked van. She shifted into drive and gunned it. I stopped running. I stood there in the rain, panting, clutching my chest. I watched the silver Lexus speed toward the exit of the parking lot. I memorized the license plate, Duciel 492. I stood there for a full minute, the rain soaking through my shirt. My brain was broken. Logic was trying to reassert itself. It wasn't her. It was a look-alike. "You're having a breakdown, David. Grief psychosis. Sarah is dead. She is at the bottom of the ocean." But my gut was screaming something else. My gut knew. That was her, the eyes. The laugh, the tick. The fear. Why would a stranger run? If a crazy man yells a name at you in a grocery store, you might back away, you might call security. You don't abandon your groceries and sprint to your car with the look of a fugitive who has just been made. I wasn't crazy. My wife wasn't dead. I ran to my own car, a sturdy Range Rover parked 2 rows over. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock the door. I threw myself into the driver's seat. I had to follow her. I didn't know where she was going, but I knew the exit she took led to the highway. If I hurried, I might catch a glimpse of the silver car. I started the engine and peeled out of the spot. I wasn't thinking about the law. I wasn't thinking about safety. I was thinking about the empty casket. I was thinking about the tears I shed. I was thinking about the $2 million in my bank account. I merged onto the main road, scanning the traffic desperately. Red car, truck, van, blue sedan. There are 4 cars ahead. The silver Lexus. It was weaving through traffic heading toward the on-ramp for I-405. I gripped the steering wheel. "I've got you," I whispered. "I've got you." Sarah. At the chase, if you could call it that, lasted for 20 minutes. It was the most terrifying drive of my life. I had to keep enough distance so she wouldn't spot me, but stay close enough not to lose her in the heavy afternoon traffic. She drove aggressively. Sarah had always been a cautious driver. She was the one who drove 5 miles under the limit and braked for squirrels. This woman drove like she was running from the law, cutting across lanes, tailgating, speeding through yellows. It was another jarring disconnect, another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit the woman I had married. She took the exit for Kirkland, a wealthy suburb on the east side of the lake. I knew this area. It was old money, big trees, quiet streets. Why was she here? She turned into a residential neighborhood. The houses here were large, set back from the road behind manicured hedges and iron gates. I dropped back, leaving 2 cars between us. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. She made a left onto Maple Street. It was a cold D-sack. I didn't turn. I drove past the intersection and pulled over to the curb, killing the engine. I waited 10 seconds, then got out of the car. I pulled my hood up. I felt like a criminal in my own life. I walked to the corner and peered around the hedges. The silver Lexus was pulling into the driveway of the 3rd house on the left. It was a beautiful house, a modern farmhouse style, white with black trim, completely different from the glass and steel structure I had designed for us. This house was warm, traditional, homey. The garage door opened automatically. She pulled inside. The door began to close. I felt a surge of panic. If that door closed, I'd lose her. I'd be standing on a street corner with nothing. But what could I do? Charge the house? Kick down the door. I was a 57-year-old architect, not James Bond. The garage door shut. The house was silent. I stood there, hidden by a large oak tree, shivering in the rain. I needed to know. I needed to see her face one more time, stationary, without the panic of the grocery store. I needed to be 100% sure before I did what? Called the police. Confronted her. I crept closer. The house had large front windows, but the blinds were drawn. However, there was a side path leading to the backyard. I looked around. The street was empty. No neighbors walking dogs. No delivery trucks. I slipped through the side gate was unlocked. I moved along the side of the house, my shoes squelching in the wet grass. I felt ridiculous. I felt insane. "David, go home." A voice in my head pleaded. "Go home, call your therapist, take a pill. This is a mistake." I reached the backyard. It was expansive, with a large patio and sliding glass doors looking into the kitchen and living area. The lights were on inside. I pressed myself against the siding, inching toward the edge of the glass door. I peeked in. The kitchen was brightly lit. It was a chef's kitchen, marble countertops, copper pots. And there she was. She had taken off the trench coat. Underneath, she was wearing a fitted cashmere sweater and jeans. She was leaning against the kitchen island, drinking a glass of water. Her hand was shaking. I could see the water trembling in the glass. She looked terrified. She was talking to someone, but I couldn't see the other person yet. She was gesturing wildly, pointing toward the door, then toward her hair. She was pacing. Then, the other person walked into the frame. My breath hitched in my throat. I felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. It was Mark. Mark, the financial advisor. Mark, the man who sobbed at her funeral. Mark, who held my hand and told me what a loss it was for the world. He walked over to her. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. He said something to her, shaking his head. She yelled something back. I couldn't hear the words through the double-paned glass, but I saw the anger in her face. Then he did something that seared itself into my memory forever. He reached out, grabbed her by the shoulders, and pulled her in. He kissed her. It wasn't a comforting kiss. It was passionate, possessive, familiar. And she kissed him back. She melted into him. The fear seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a desperate need for his comfort. I stumbled back. My foot caught on a garden gnome or some decoration, and I nearly fell. I caught myself on the siding. I had to get out of there. If they saw me, God, if they saw me. I turned and ran. I ran back through the side gate, back down the street, back to my car. I got in, locked the doors, and drove. I didn't look in the rearview mirror until I was 3 miles away. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and vomited out the open door. The turkey sandwich I never ate, the bile, the grief, it all came up. I sat there, heaving, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. It wasn't an accident. She didn't drown. She wasn't eaten by crabs. She was alive. She was living 20 miles away from me. She was sleeping with our financial advisor. And the $2 million, the realization hit me like a freight train, the life insurance, the rushed policy update, the accident where the body would never be found. Mark was a financial advisor. He knew the systems. He knew how to move money. He knew how to handle claims. They didn't just have an affair. They planned this. They sat down, probably over wine, and planned her death. They planned my grief. They calculated exactly how much pain I could endure, and exactly how much money they could make off it. I wasn't just a widower. I was a Mark. I was the victim of the most intimate, cruel con imaginable. I looked at my face in the rearview mirror. I looked old. My eyes were red, my skin gray, my hair thinning. I looked like a broken man. But as I stared at myself, something changed. The shock began to recede, replaced by something hotter, harder. A cold fury began to rise in my chest, burning away the grief. They thought David Reynolds was a sad old man who would fade away into his big empty house. They thought I would mourn her for the rest of my life while they played house on Maple Street with my money. I wiped my mouth with a napkin. I put the car in gear. Okay, I said to the empty car. My voice was steady now. You want to be dead, Sarah. Okay. Let's see what happens when the dead come back to haunt the living. I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. The police require proof. The police require paperwork. And if I went to the police now, Mark and Sarah might run. They clearly had resources. They could disappear again for real this time. No. I needed to know everything first. I needed to know how they did it. I needed to know where the money was. I needed to destroy them as thoroughly as they had destroyed me. I drove home. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in my dark living room petting Buster, and for the first time in 6 months I didn't cry. I started planning. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of grief had lifted, replaced by the sharp, tactical focus of an architect looking at a flawed design. I needed to dismantle their structure, brick by brick. My first target was the money. I drove to my office early, before any of my partners arrived. I needed the high-speed scanner and the quiet. I had a file at home, the after file, as Emily called it, containing all the documents related to Sarah's death. The police report, the death certificate C issued in absentia, and the insurance payout papers. I spread them out on the large drafting table. The insurance company was a major national firm, Guardian Life. The policy number was GL8839-201. The payout 2000. Beneficiary David Reynolds. The money had been deposited into our joint account, which I had then moved to a personal savings account under Mark's advice. Mark. I remembered the meeting we had 2 weeks after the funeral. He came to the house. He wore a charcoal suit. He sat on the velvet sofa Sarah loved and spoke in hushed, reverent tones. David, he had said, sliding a folder across the coffee table. This is a lot of liquidity. You're grieving. You're vulnerable. We need to protect this asset. I recommend moving it into a high-yield trust, something secure, something you don't have to think about. I had nodded, blindly trusting him. Whatever you think is best, Mark. I logged into my bank account. The money was gone. Well, not gone, but moved. It showed a transfer of $1.8 million to Reynolds Trust Management, an entity Mark had set up for me. The remaining $200,000 was in my checking account, presumably to keep me comfortable while they siphoned the rest. I needed to see where that trust money actually went. I called Mark's office. Good morning, David? His secretary, Linda, chirped. She was a sweet woman who had sent flowers to the funeral. How are you holding up? I'm managing, Linda. Is Mark in? He's actually out of the office for the rest of the week. Personal emergency. Can I take a message? No, that's fine. I just had a question about my portfolio statement. I can wait. Personal emergency. I bet his dead girlfriend had just been spotted in a grocery store. They were probably in panic mode. I hung up and called an old friend from college, Greg. Greg wasn't an architect. He was a forensic accountant who worked for the district attorney's office in Chicago. He was the kind of guy who found joy in tracing shell companies. David, Greg sounded surprised. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. How are you? I need a favor, Greg, a big one. And it needs to be off the books. I heard the shift in his tone. Talk to me. I told him everything. The woman in the store. The chase. The house on Maple Street. The kiss. Silence stretched on the line for a long time. David, he said slowly. Are you sure? I mean, really sure grief can make us see things? I saw them kiss, Greg. I saw her face. It's her. I need to know where the money went. I gave Mark control of the trust. I have the account numbers. Send them to me, Greg said, his voice hardening. If this is real. Jesus, David. If this is real, this is fraud on a massive scale. Life insurance fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. I sent you the details via encrypted email. How long? Give me 24 hours. If the money moved, I'll find where it landed. While Greg worked on the money, I went to work on the house. I looked up the property records for the house on Maple Street in Kirkland. Public records are a beautiful thing. The house was purchased 4 months ago. The owner was listed as Aurora Holdings LC bio. I searched for Aurora Holdings. It was registered in Delaware. A classic move to hide ownership. But the registered agent was a law firm in Seattle. A firm I recognized. It was the same firm Mark used for his business dealings. I dug deeper. I found a building permit application for a kitchen remodel filed 2 months ago for the Maple Street address. The applicant wasn't Aurora Holdings. It was S. Miller. Sarah's maiden name was Miller. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Sloppy. They were getting sloppy. Or maybe just arrogant. Who would look for a dead woman's maiden name on a permit for a house owned by a shell company? Gotcha. I whispered. I printed everything. The property records, the permit, the LLC registration. I was building a dossier. That afternoon, I drove back to Kirkland. I didn't go to the house. I went to the coffee shop down the street. It was a trendy place with large windows facing the road. I sat there with a laptop and a cold coffee for 4 hours, watching the traffic. At 3:45 p.m., the silver Lexus drove by. It pulled into a small plaza across the street. Sarah, my dead wife, got out. She was wearing sunglasses and a hat, but I knew her walk. She went into a dry cleaner. I watched her through the window. She looked normal. She wasn't the terrified woman from the grocery store anymore. She was running errands. She was living a Tuesday. I felt a surge of nausea. How could she do this? How could she sleep at night? We were married for 25 years. We built a life. We struggled through miscarriages, celebrated promotions, buried parents together. Was it all a lie? Or was she just a sociopath who had worn a mask for 2.5 decades? She came out with a suit wrapped in plastic. A man's suit. Mark's suit. She put it in the car and drove off. I didn't follow her this time. I didn't need to. I knew where she lived. I knew who she was with. I went home and waited for Greg's call. It came at 9:00 p.m. David, Greg said. No pleasantries. You were right. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 2 days. Tell me. The trust account. It's a funnel. The money sat there for exactly 3 days. Then it was transferred to an offshore account in the Caymans. Standard layering. But here's where they messed up. The Caymans account pays a monthly consulting fee of $15,000 to a domestic account here in Seattle. Let me guess, I said. Aurora Holdings. Close, Greg said. It goes to an account under the name M&S Design Consultants. The signatories on that account are Mark Davis, and wait for it, Sarah Miller. She used her own name. She has a fake ID. David, the social security number attached to Sarah Miller on that account doesn't match your wife's. It belongs to a woman who died in 1995. But the driver's license photo on file with the bank. I hacked into the bank's KYC verification logs. It's her. It's your wife. Blonde hair, glasses, but it's her. So they are living off the interest. They're living off the principal, David. They're draining it slowly to avoid flags. But the bulk of the cash is sitting offshore waiting for them. My guess. They plan to disappear for good in a year or two. Once the grieving husband cools off and the insurance company closes the file permanently. They stole my money to fund their new life. David, Greg said, his voice serious. This is enough to go to the FBI right now. We have wire fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft. I can make the call. We can have them in cuffs by morning. I looked at the empty seat next to me on the couch. I looked at the urn on the mantel. The urn that contained nothing but sand because we had no ashes. No, I said. David, don't be stupid. These people are dangerous. If they faked a death, who knows what else they'll do. I don't want them in cuffs, Greg. Not yet. What do you want? I want them to hurt, I said, my voice flat. I want them to feel the panic I felt. I want to take everything from them before I give them to the police. I want to be the ghost that haunts them. David, just give me the account access codes if you can crack them. Greg, can you do that? A long pause. I can't give you access to the offshore account. That's military-grade encryption. But the domestic one, the M&S Design account, Yeah, I can get you in. Do it? I'm sending you the login. David, be careful. If you touch that money, you're technically committing a crime too. I'm not going to steal it, Greg. I'm just going to reallocate it. I hung up. I opened my laptop. I logged into the M&S Design Consultants account. Balance 48,000. It was their operating cash, their grocery money, their gas money. I looked at the transaction history. Whole Foods, Shell Gas, Netflix, a wine club subscription. It was so mundane, it was so domestic, it was sickening. I hovered my mouse over the transfer button. This was step 1. I typed in the amount to 47,900. I left them 100. I transferred it to a charity for ocean conservation. A little poetic justice. I hit submit. Transaction successful. I leaned back. Tomorrow, Sarah would go to buy her organic kale, and her card would be declined. Tomorrow, Mark would try to pay for gas, and he'd be embarrassed. But that was just a prank. That was just a jab. I needed a knockout punch. I needed to see the insurance investigator. The insurance investigator who had handled Sarah's claim was a man named Mr. Henderson. I remembered him as a sharp, cynical man who had asked uncomfortable questions during the initial investigation. He had been suspicious of the missing body, but without evidence of foul play and with the police ruling it an accident, he had been forced to sign off. I called him the next morning. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, his tone guarded. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Is there a problem with the settlement?" "You could say that," I said. "I have information regarding the claim on Sarah Reynolds. New information." "What kind of information?" "The kind that proves you were right to be suspicious. Can you meet me? Today?" We met at a diner halfway between my house and his office. Henderson looked tired. He wore a rumpled suit and smelled of cigarettes. I didn't say a word. I just slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were the photos. I hadn't just watched the house yesterday. I had gone back at dawn. I had a telephoto lens. A hobby from my architecture days, photographing buildings. I had caught them on their patio having coffee. The picture was crystal clear. Sarah in a robe laughing. Mark reading the paper. The morning sun hitting her face perfectly. It was undeniable. Henderson pulled out the photos. He adjusted his glasses. He stared at them for a full minute. His mouth tightened into a thin line. "When were these taken?" he asked, his voice low. "Yesterday morning. In Kirkland." He looked up at me. "She's alive."
"Yes, and the man."
"That's your financial advisor, Mark Davis. He handled the payout." Henderson let out a low whistle. "Son of a bitch. They played us. They played all of us. They stole $2 million from your company, Mr. Henderson, and they destroyed my life." Henderson's eyes gleamed. He wasn't looking at me with pity anymore. He was looking at me like a partner. Insurance investigators hate being defrauded more than anything. It's personal for them. "What do you want to do, Mr. Reynolds? We can freeze their assets. We can have the police pick them up within the hour." "No," I said again. "Not yet." He frowned. "Why?" "Every minute they are free is a minute they could run. They won't run. They think they're safe. They think I'm a grieving idiot. I drained their checking account last night. They'll just think it's a banking error or a hack. They'll be busy trying to fix it. So what's the plan?" "I have a dinner party coming up," I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. "In 2 days? It's the 6-month memorial dinner. I invited close friends. I want to invite Mark. You want to confront him there. I want to destroy him there. I want you to be there, Mr. Henderson. But not as an investigator, as a distant cousin of mine, just a guest." Henderson tapped the photo on the table. "This is dangerous, David. If he figures out, you know." "He won't. He's arrogant. He thinks he's smarter than me. And Sarah, I have a special invitation for her. I explained my idea. It was risky. It was theatrical. It was vengeful." Henderson listened, and slowly a grin spread across his face. "You're a scary man, Mr. Reynolds." "I'm a widower," I said. "I have nothing left to lose." That afternoon I called Mark. "David." He answered on the second ring. He sounded stressed. "I was just about to call you. There's been a slight glitch with one of the secondary accounts. Nothing to worry about. Just a banking error." "Is everything okay, Mark?" I asked, feigning concern. Yes, fine. Just administrative headaches. What can I do for you?" "I'm hosting a small dinner on Friday. It's been 6 months. I feel like I'm finally ready to turn a corner. I wanted to thank the people who supported me. You were there for me, Mark. I'd love for you to come." Hesitation. "Friday. I might have plans." "Please, Mark, it would mean a lot. Just a few close friends." "Good wine. I'm making my famous roast." "Okay," he sighed. "For you, David, I'll be there. 700 p.m. Don't be late." Step 2 complete. Now for step 3, the bait for Sarah. I knew Sarah's weakness. It wasn't money. It wasn't Mark. It was her vanity, her legacy. She was an interior designer, and she was obsessed with her reputation. I created a fake email address, Awards Northwest Design Council. Org. I wrote an email to her fake alias, Sarah Miller. I had found the email address in the bank documents Greg hacked. Dear Ms. Miller, we are writing to inform you that your recent renovation project on Maple Street has been nominated for the Emerging Designer of the Year award. The committee was incredibly impressed by the kitchen remodel photos submitted by your contractor. We are holding a preliminary gala on Friday night at the Reynolds residence. The current owner is a patron of the arts. We understand this is unusual, but the owner specifically requested to meet the talent behind the new wave of Kirkland designs. It was a long shot, a massive long shot. Would she buy it? Would she risk coming to her own husband's house? But I knew something else. Sarah didn't know I lived in the big house anymore. I had told Mark, and by extension, her, that I was putting the house on the market and staying in a condo downtown to escape the memories. I had lied about that months ago, just because I didn't want people dropping by. If she thought the house was sold, if she thought Reynolds was just a coincidence or a new owner, and her ego. She wanted to be recognized. Even as a dead woman, she couldn't resist the praise. I hit send. 10 minutes later, a reply. Thank you for this honor. I will be in attendance. S. Miller, she was coming. She thought she was walking into an awards gala at a stranger's house. She was walking into her own wake. Friday arrived with a storm. Thunder rattled the windows of the big house on the cliff. It was the perfect backdrop for what was about to happen. I had set the table for 8 myself. Emily, who had flown in again, confused but supportive, and Mr. Henderson he introduced as Cousin Tom, 2 of my business partners, Mark, and an empty chair at the head of the table. The guests arrived at 700. The mood was somber but polite. Mark walked in looking harried. He had dark circles under his eyes. The frozen bank account was clearly stressing him out. David, he said, shaking my hand. His grip was weak.
House looks quiet. It is, I said.
But not for long. We sat down. I poured the wine. A very expensive Cabernet, Sarah's favorite. To Sarah, I toasted, raising my glass. To Sarah, everyone murmured. Mark took a large gulp. We started eating. The conversation was stilted. Emily was watching Mark like a hawk. I'd told her everything an hour before the dinner. She was vibrating with rage, barely keeping it together. So, Mark, I said, cutting into my roast beef.
How is business?
Good, good, he said, dabbing his mouth. Markets are volatile, you know. I bet, I said. I heard there's a lot of fraud lately, identity theft, shell companies. Must be hard to keep track of it all. Mark froze mid-chew. He looked at me. My expression was pleasant neutral. Yes, he said slowly. It's a concern. Cousin Tom, I gestured to Henderson. Tom works in loss prevention. He was telling me some crazy stories about people faking their own deaths. Mark dropped his fork. It clattered loudly on the china. Slippery fingers, he muttered, bending down to pick it up. It's fascinating, Henderson said, his voice gravelly. People think they can disappear, but they always leave a trace, a credit card swipe, a license plate, a grocery store visit. Mark was pale now. He wasn't eating. He was looking at the door. David, Mark said, standing up. I'm not feeling well. I think I should go. Sit down, Mark, I said. My voice wasn't pleasant anymore. It was steel. Excuse me. I said, sit down. The guest of honor hasn't arrived yet. Guest of honor, Emily asked. David, who else is coming? Just then, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the silent dining room. I said, smiling. Right on time. I stood up. Mark, why didn't you get that? It's probably your +1. I didn't invite anyone. Mark stammered. I know, I said. I did. I walked to the front door. Mark followed me, confused and terrified. The others trailed behind. I opened the heavy oak door. Standing there, shaking a wet umbrella, was Sarah. She was wearing a stunning black dress. She had her blonde wig on, her glasses. She looked up, a polite smile on her face, expecting a stranger. Hello, she began. I'm Sarah Mill. She stopped. She saw me. She saw the hallway she had designed. She saw the painting she had bought in Paris on the wall. And then she saw Mark standing behind me. Her face didn't just go pale. It disintegrated. The mask fell away, leaving a raw, gaping horror. She dropped the umbrella. David, she whispered. Hello, darling, I said. You're late for your own memorial. For a second, nobody moved. The silence was absolute. Then, Sarah screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a primal sound of shock. She turned to run, just like at the store. But this time, I was ready. Henderson! I shouted. Henderson stepped forward, flashing a badge I didn't know he had. Insurance Fraud Investigation Unit. Don't move. Sarah froze. She looked at Mark. Mark looked at the floor. You! She hissed at Mark! You set me up! You told me the house was sold! I didn't! Mark yelled, panic taking over. He knows everything! I stepped out onto the porch. blocking her path.
Come inside, Sarah!
I said gently. It's raining, and we have so much to discuss. She looked at me. Her eyes, those blue eyes I had loved for half my life, were filled with hatred. Not remorse. Hatred. She hated me for catching her. I hate you, she spat. I always hated you, you boring old, pathetic man. It hurt, I won't lie. It felt like a knife in the gut. But it also severed the last thread of attachment I had to her. I know, I said. That's why you killed yourself. But the thing about being dead, Sarah, is that you don't get to enjoy the money. I gestured to the living room. After you. She walked in. Defeated, we went back to the dining room. It was a surreal scene. My dead wife in a blonde wig sitting at the table with her lover and the insurance investigator. So, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. Who wants dessert? Cut the crap. David? Mark snapped. What do you want? You want the money back? We can give it back. Just don't bring the police into this. The money is already gone. Mark, I said. I donated your operating cash to charity last night. And as for the offshore account, Greg, are you on the line? I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was on speaker. I'm here. David, Greg's voice filled the room. And I've just finished forwarding the packet to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. They're very interested in the wire transfers. Mark put his head in his hands. Sarah just stared at me, cold and unblinking. Why? She asked. Why didn't you just let us go? You had the house, you had your career. Why couldn't you just let me be happy? Happy? I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. You destroyed me, Sarah. You watched me cry at your funeral. You watched me mourn. You didn't just leave me. You tortured me. I was bored, she said, simply, cruelly. I was bored of you. I was bored of this house. I wanted a new life, and Mark made me feel alive. And the $2 million helped, I added. It was my money, she snapped. I paid the premiums. It was fraud, Henderson interjected. And it's a felony, multiple felonies. David. Emily spoke up for the first time. She was shaking with rage. Let me call the cops. Now, I want to see them in handcuffs. I looked at Sarah. I looked at the woman I had shared a bed with for 25 years. I looked for any trace of the woman I loved. There was nothing. Just a greedy, selfish stranger in a wig. Go ahead, Emily, I said softly. Call them. The arrival of the police was a spectacle of flashing blue and red lights that cut through the storm, illuminating the wet driveway of my home like a disco for the damned. Emily had made the call with a voice that trembled not with fear, but with a vindictive kind of joy. 911, what is your emergency? I'd like to report a fraud in progress, and a resurrection. My brother's dead wife is currently eating roast beef in our dining room. When the officers walked in, rain dripping from their brims, they looked confused. They expected a domestic dispute, maybe a drunk uncle. They didn't expect a woman in a blonde wig and a black evening gown being guarded by an insurance investigator and a furious sister. Ma'am. The older officer asked Sarah, do you have identification? Sarah looked at him. She looked at me. For a moment I saw the gears turning in her head. She was calculating the odds of a run. She glanced at the patio doors. Don't even think about it, Sarah. I said, my voice tired. The gate is locked, and you're wearing heels. She slumped. The fight went out of her, replaced by a sullen, petulant resignation. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a driver's license. This is fake, the officer said immediately, shining his flashlight on it. Sarah Miller. The lamination is off. Her name is Sarah Reynolds. Henderson interjected, stepping forward with his badge. She was declared dead 6 months ago. The man next to her is Mark Davis. He facilitated the life insurance fraud. We have the wire transfer records. The officer's eyebrows shot up. He looked at Mark. Mark was sweating so profusely he looked like he had just run a marathon. I was coerced, Mark blurted out. Sarah whipped her head around. You coward! You spineless little worm! It was your idea! My idea, Mark shrieked, his voice cracking. You came to me! You said you couldn't stand him anymore! You said you wanted to disappear! And you said you knew how to wash the money! They were screaming at each other now, their carefully constructed alliance crumbling the moment the handcuffs came out. It was pathetic. It was ugly. And I watched it all from the head of the table, sipping my wine. That's enough! The officer shouted. Both of you, stand up. Hands behind your back. Watching my wife being handcuffed in the foyer of the house she had decorated was a surreal experience. I remembered carrying her over that threshold. I remembered kissing her in that hallway. Now, an officer was reading her rights while she glared at me with pure venom. David, she said as they led her out. David, wait! I walked over to her. Yes, I didn't kill anyone, she said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. I just left. Is that a crime? Leaving a marriage? Divorce is leaving a marriage, Sarah, I said. Faking your death, stealing $2 million, and letting your husband mourn an empty casket. That's not leaving. That's a war crime against the heart. I'll deny it, she hissed. I'll say you were in on it. Good luck with that, I said. I'm the one who called the cops. They shoved her into the back of the cruiser. As the car pulled away, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was just lightness. The heavy blanket of grief that had suffocated me for half a year was gone. The next few weeks were a blur of legal chaos. The story broke the next morning. Emily, ethical journalist that she was, recused herself from writing it, but she gave the scoop to a colleague. The headline ran on the front page of the Seattle Times. The Goff Kirkland D. Dead wife found alive at her own memorial. My face was everywhere. I was the vengeful architect. The internet predictably went wild. Strangers sent me messages of support. People made TikToks reenacting the grocery store chase. It was bizarre. I stayed inside, refusing interviews. The legal case against them was a slam dunk, thanks to Greg and Henderson. Mark cracked within 48 hours. He cut a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he gave the district attorney everything. He handed over the laptops, the offshore account keys, the emails. He painted Sarah as the mastermind, the femme fatale who seduced him into a life of crime. According to Mark's testimony, Sarah had been planning this for 2 years. She felt stifled by our life. She felt I was too safe, too boring, too old. She wanted excitement. She wanted a restart. When she met Mark, she found a man weak enough to manipulate and greedy enough to help. They had staged the accident perfectly. Sarah had driven the car to the cliff edge, put it in neutral, and jumped out at the last second. A diving team, hired by Mark through the dark web, had been waiting below to ensure the car sank and to retrieve her if she fell. She had hiked up a trail to a waiting car Mark had planted. It was intricate. It was sociopathic. I was called in for questioning multiple times, mostly to verify timelines. The detective, a sharp woman named Detective Morales, looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. In 20 years on the force, she told me one afternoon in the interrogation room, I've never seen a victim do their own legwork like this. You handed us the case on a silver platter. I needed to know, I said. If I had waited for you guys, she might have been in Mexico by now. True, she admitted. Woot closed the file, Mr. Reynolds. We thought it was an accident. We don't usually look for ghosts. The money was recovered, most of it, anyway. The offshore accounts were frozen. The house on Maple Street was seized. The $2 million was returned to the insurance company, minus a hefty legal fee. I didn't care. I didn't want a dime of it. But the real cost wasn't financial. It was the rewriting of my history. Every memory I had of the last 10 years was now tainted. Every I love you, every anniversary, every smile. I had to re-examine them all. Was she faking it then? Was she planning my misery while we were on vacation in Cabo? Was she laughing at me behind my back? I spent nights walking through the empty house taking down photos. Not because they made me sad, but because they made me angry. I looked at her smiling face in a picture from our 20th anniversary and I wanted to smash the glass. You liar, I whispered to the photo. You absolute fraud. I realized that I wasn't just grieving the loss of my wife. I was grieving the loss of my reality. I had been living in a play, and I was the only one who didn't know it was scripted. 3 months after the arrest, the trial began. It was the event of the season. The courtroom was packed. Sarah entered in a prison jumpsuit, looking stripped down. No makeup, no designer clothes, hair roots showing. She looked older. She looked hard. She refused to look at me. I sat in the front row next to Emily. I needed to see this through. The prosecution laid it out, the fake ID, the rental agreements, the surveillance photos I had taken. The testimony from Mark, who sat on the stand weeping, blaming his love for Sarah for his bad decisions. Sarah's defense was weak. Her lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity, brought on by marital stress. He tried to paint me as emotionally distant, driving her to desperation. Mr. Reynolds was a workaholic. The lawyer argued. He neglected his wife. She felt invisible. She made a desperate, irrational choice to escape a toxic environment. It was infuriating. I felt Emily tense up beside me. Don't react, I whispered to her. Let them talk. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter because the evidence of the money was undeniable. You don't accidentally wire $2 million to the Caymans because you're feeling neglected. You do it because you're greedy. When it was my turn to testify, the room went silent. Mr. Reynolds, the prosecutor asked, when did you first suspect your wife was alive? When I saw her buying kale, I said. A ripple of laughter went through the court. It sounds funny, but she had a specific way of tucking her hair. You can fake a death, but you can't fake a habit. And how did you feel when you realized she had framed you for a grieving widower? I looked at Sarah then. She finally looked back. Her eyes were cold, defiant. I felt like a fool, I said honestly. I felt like the last 25 years of my life were a joke, but then I felt determined. I realized that if she could kill Sarah Reynolds to start a new life, then I could kill the part of me that loved her. The jury was out for only 4 hours, guilty. On all counts. Insurance fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, attempted grand larceny. The judge, a stern man who seemed personally offended by the waste of court resources, didn't hold back. Mrs. Reynolds, or Ms. Miller, as you prefer, the judge said. Your actions were not only criminal, they were morally bankrupt. You played on the deepest sympathies of your community. You wasted police resources. You destroyed a man's life for profit. He sentenced Mark to 8 years, with parole eligibility in 4 thanks to his plea deal. He sentenced Sarah to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. As the gavel banged down, Sarah didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just closed her eyes. I watched them lead her away. It was over. The ghost was exorcised. But there was one last thing I had to do. 6 months after the sentencing, 1 year exactly since the accident, I drove to the federal women's prison in Dublin, California. Emily told me I was crazy. Why go see her, David? She asked. She's poison. Let her rot. I need to close the book, Em, I said. I need to turn the last page. The prison was a stark gray complex rising out of the dry California landscape. It was a far cry from the lush, green cliffs of Seattle. It was sterile, smelling of industrial cleaner and despair. I sat in the visitation room, separated from the inmates by a thick sheet of plexiglass. I picked up the phone receiver. Sarah walked in. She looked different again. Prison had stripped away the last of her pretenses. She had lost weight. Her hair was graying at the temples. No dye allowed in here. She walked with a shuffle. She sat down and picked up the phone. She didn't smile. Hello, David, she said. Her voice was raspy. Hello, Sarah. We stared at each other for a long moment. The silence was heavy with everything we had lost. You look well, she said. You look lighter. I am, I said. I sold the house. Her eyes flickered. You did? Last week. A nice young couple bought it. They're going to repaint the kitchen. They hate the cabinets you picked out. A flash of the old Sarah, the perfectionist designer, crossed her face. Those cabinets were imported. They don't care, I said. They want to make it their own. She looked down at her hands. Why did you come, David? To gloat? To tell me about my cabinets? No, I said. I came to ask you one question. Just one. And since you're in here for 15 years, you have no reason to lie anymore. Ask away. Was any of it real? I asked. The 25 years. The trips. The quiet nights. Was any of it real? Or was I just a mark from the beginning? She sighed. She looked up at the ceiling, then back at me. Her expression softened just a fraction. It was real, David, she said. In the beginning. I loved you. I really did. We were happy. So what happened? Life? She said. Routine. I got older. I looked in the mirror and I saw my mother. I saw a boring, predictable future stretching out until I died. I panicked. I wanted to be someone else. I wanted to be young and dangerous again. So you killed yourself? I killed Sarah Reynolds, she corrected, because Sarah Reynolds was suffocating. And me. Did I suffocate you? No, she said. You were safe. You were the anchor. But David, sometimes an anchor just feels like a weight. It was a cruel metaphor, but it was the truth. I accepted it. Thank you, I said. That's what I needed to hear. For what? To know that it wasn't my fault, I said. I spent 6 months thinking I failed you, thinking I could have done more. But I didn't fail you, Sarah. You failed yourself. You were so empty inside that you had to burn down the world just to feel warm. She flinched. I'm not going to visit you again, I said. I'm not going to write. This is it, David. Her voice cracked. It's lonely in here. I know, I said. I was lonely in that big house for 6 months. I know exactly how it feels. You'll get used to it. I hung up the phone. I stood up. She pressed her hand against the glass. Her eyes were wet. David, she mouthed. I didn't look back. I walked out of the room, through the metal detectors, out the heavy steel doors, and into the blinding California sun. I inhaled deeply. The air tasted like dust and freedom. I drove back to the airport, but I didn't fly back to Seattle. I flew to Italy. I had always wanted to go to Tuscany. Sarah never wanted to go. She preferred Paris or London. She said the countryside was boring. I rented a small villa on a hill overlooking a vineyard. It was quiet. It was peaceful. I spent my days sketching, not houses for clients, but just drawing for the joy of it. I drew the olive trees. I drew the old stone walls. I drew the light hitting the hills. I met a woman there. Elena. She owned the bakery in the village. She was 50, with laugh lines around her eyes and flour on her apron. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know about the zombie wife or the vengeful architect. She just knew I was the American who liked her focaccia. One evening, we were sitting on my terrace drinking wine, a cheap, local red that tasted better than any 200 bottle Sarah had ever bought. You have sad eyes, David, Elena said, touching my hand. But they are getting clearer. I had a long year, I said. We'll all have long years, she smiled. But the grapes grow back every season. The sun comes back every morning. Life is stubborn. I looked out at the rolling hills. Bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, I thought about the empty casket. I thought about the silver Lexus. I thought about Sarah in her gray cell. I took a sip of wine. Yes, I said. Life is stubborn. I wasn't David the widower anymore. I wasn't David the victim. I was just David. And for the first time in a very long time, the future wasn't a blueprint I had to follow. It was a blank page, and I couldn't wait to draw on it. Outro. That's my story. It's a strange thing to say that the best thing my wife ever did for me was die. But in a way, she set me free. I learned that grief is a powerful teacher, but revenge is a mirror. It shows you who you really are. I saw a man who was willing to fight for his dignity, and I'm proud of him. I hope none of you ever have to spot a ghost in Isle 4. But if you do, make sure you get the license plate. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you've ever discovered a secret that changed your life, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe for more stories, and I'll see you in the next one.